And thanks everybody for joining. Maybe I'll set us off with the agenda to begin with. We have had a lot of demand for this session, a lot of questions, and that's what sparked us to set this off in the beginning. Of course, DTC, a big trend in our industry, so everyone's thinking about it. First, we'll just cover, what do we mean when we say DTC? What is driving that trend? What's happening in the industry around it? And then thinking about, in what situations is DTC appropriate and how do you think about sort of the outcomes from a DTC program? We'll talk a bit about sort of strategies for setting up a successful model like this. And then we'll kind of wrap with a case study of one that Phil has worked on, done quite a bit of this DTC type thing. So we'll go through a little bit of one of those and then the results that we saw from that. As Mira mentioned, definitely encourage questions from you all. Any insights that you all have had as well is great. So we'll do that as we go along, and then we'll have a dedicated Q&A session at the end. All right, so thanks. Let me introduce myself here. Jonas Bolai, I'm Chief Product Officer here at Phil. My background is consumer technology, really. So I spent the last 10 years before I was at Phil at Zillow. When we were starting out there, it was a totally unknown brand, and now probably most of you have used Zillow at some point in your life. So that's the sort of consumer side of things, and consumer technology is very near and dear to my heart and really my bread and butter. So excited to talk to you all about this too. And I'm joined here by a partner, Mitten Soni from Sun Pharma. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, no, thanks, Jonas. Glad to be here. My name is Mitten Soni. I've been in the industry for about 10 years. Started my career on the agency side of things before moving to the brand side. Similar to Jonas, I've had a love of technology and healthcare and the intersection of it. A lot of my roles have been within digital as well as brand marketing at both small and medium-sized pharma companies, as well as a stint or two at a biotech startup where I led portfolio strategy. And today I'm currently the HCP and patient marketing lead for Sequa, which is a dry eye disease product developed by Sun Pharmaceuticals. So,
Great. Yeah, so much. Thanks so much for joining. Really glad that you could. I should introduce Phil as well, Phil, the company. So we're a digital hub provider. We specialize with retail, specialty light brands, helping them build configurable access programs and have a very strong technology DNA. And so that's kind of how we have sort of built up this expertise in the DTC side. Great. So before we go further, I'm curious to just get a read from the audience here. Those of you here, how established is your organization's DTC program today? Are you just kind of thinking about it? You're not yet established. You're kind of, putting together some of the pieces. Are you already sort of building that today? Have you done it just recently and so kind of, brand new and figuring out how it works, or are you sort of well on your way and established? So I'm curious to get a read from you all if you could answer the poll there. Great. So it looks like a healthy mix. So everyone's here because they're interested and curious. Maybe a lot in the information gathering phase. Hopefully we can be helpful in that. Some a little bit further along, looks like. Those of you who are further along and particularly more well established, I am curious to hear, and you feel free to chime in later on with any tips that you might have, any perspective that you might have. Feel free to write those into the comment box as we go along. Great, thank you. So let's think about a little bit about what's driving this trend in general. What's happening in society at large and technology at large. Patients and consumers are getting used to being able to pull their phone out of their pocket. See my phone there, and push a button and just make magic happen in all aspects of their life. We saw this at Zillow. So I'll take you on a little anecdote here. The way that real estate used to work is, if you wanted to buy a house, you would go into your real estate agent's office and they would sit you down at a desk and they would pull out a binder of pictures of homes, of listings, and you would say, well, I want 4 bedrooms and da-da-da. And then they'd say, okay, I'll pick, 4 houses out of this binder and then we'll go drive around and that's what you get to choose from. That was the old world. Now with Zillow, of course, we completely changed that. You have total choice. You have complete access to information. You as the consumer are, empowered to be driving the whole process, and the, real estate agent's a facilitator. That's what we did in real estate. And, healthcare is no different. Across the industry, consumers have, developed this habit, this, belief that they should be in control, which of course they should, and that they should be driving, and that they can do everything sort of from this, power tool that they've got carrying around on their phone. So they're, seeing that in, other aspects of their life, and then of course wanting the same thing out of their healthcare experiences. So you can see little survey data here. 4 out of 5 patients want to use technology to manage their healthcare. Of course they do. We all do. 60%, want their digital care experience to be just like retail, like e-commerce, right? You're able to do things, so easily, so quickly, have things show up at your door. Think about, the revolution that has been ordering things on Amazon. And your last one in 4 patients, even if they like their current provider, would switch just if that provider has, higher digital services, high quality digital services. So that, of course, totally makes sense. But you think about these sort of like broader trends. That's, I think, what is driving, the desire from a patient standpoint to see that show up in their healthcare journey as well. So why don't we go maybe just talk about what does it mean to have a DTC model? What is DTC? Think about these as sort of 4, Lego blocks, building blocks of a successful DTC program. And really, you kind of need all of those to have it all make sense. First, of course, is, a DTC marketing strategy. No strangers to DTC marketing. I would say that, one of the big things that is, a bit different is that, it's very strongly shifted in a DTC model towards performance marketing. So you're able to really see, what your ad spend is doing, and, attribute all the events downstream. We'll talk more about that later. So think about, multi-channel ad campaigns, of course, your classic sort of brand advertising, but also, social, what you're doing in search, what you're doing in display advertising, et cetera, with, this heavy emphasis on performance marketing. So that's, think about kind of the top funnel, building block. Then, of course, a telemed channel, an option for patients to be able to see a provider, be able to get their prescriptions via a telehealth appointment. And thinking about that consumer trend that we talked about earlier, being able to do that, within their own control, within their own home, within their own schedule, is such a big driver of the, of the whole thing. From there, you don't want the end of the experience for the patient to be, just that telehealth visit, but really going all the way through to the patient experience after that. If they are deemed appropriate for therapy, then, the pharmacy side of it, the, hub, the enrollment side of it as well, online prescription management, all these pieces that come, after the, initial diagnosis and therapy, prescription, all of that stuff, big important block too. So you have those kind of like continuity through the different steps in the process, refills, home delivery, updates on those prescriptions, ways to manage it, et cetera. So that is kind of thinking about it from the patient experience journey and the, different blocks to deliver that. I would say maybe a little bit undercounted, but equally, maybe more so critical is the back office integration, particularly between the healthcare provider and the pharmacy side of it. So think about, the prior auth process, having a very streamlined workflow, having a telemed channel, that provider that is, has a really strong back office workflow, but then also great integration with the pharmacy side of it. That's, really critical to, winning coverage for those patients, which of course is going to end up with, stronger patient access outcomes, as well as, having stronger coverage on the, on the payer side. So that kind of think about these 4 different building blocks, all pieced together. And I would say too that, it's not really new, maybe like in this exact formulation, starting to grow more. But you think about, a couple of industry examples, one more recent, one less. Hims and Hers is a good example of model that's been out there for, a number of years. They're a telehealth provider. They have a digital prescription model as well. Of course, very different business model than sort of the typical pharma brand. But they've been around. They've really established themselves with, the set of therapeutic areas that they cover, and have tapped into this consumer trend that we've seen in other industries, and then brought that over to, a small slice of the pharmacy world. So that's kind of one example, Hims and Hers. Another one, of course, that's on top of everybody's mind is Lilly Direct. So we've been very excited to see them lean into this model. We've had great experience ourselves with it, with our brands that we partner with, and so great to see another one doing the same thing. So that's another great example. Now, I'm curious, maybe thinking about these building blocks, thinking about these existing examples. Mitten, what's your perspective on sort of these different kind of alternative models for DTC, things we've seen here, and then how manufacturers are leveraging that?
Yeah, exciting is the word I would use right off the bat. It's really cool to see this, and there's been a couple of reasons why we're seeing this rise of DTC, and I'll break out the difference between what Lilly's doing and what Hims are doing in a second, but I think there's more acceptance just from patients themselves, right? Post-pandemic, it, there's this rise in acceptance of telehealth. And I think it goes more than just the convenience of it. I think when you dig a little bit deeper into it, we all learn during that time frame that my time is just as important, if not more important, than the dollars that I'm spending. So why not find cost-effective ways to really kind of focus on that? So I think seeing that acceptance from the patient side, seeing the acceptance from payers and government, right? Like seeing the reimbursement channel start coming back in for physicians to help them see patients on a via telehealth side of things is fantastic to see. And then, part of that is the increased pressures that manufacturers are starting to see from whether it's the government and the Inflation Reduction Act or from payers and PBMs. It is kind of creating this perfect storm where how can I, as a manufacturer of a medicine, reach my patients at the most opportune time? I think what Lilly's doing is fascinating, and I think we're going to see a lot of organizations really look to them to see is this a model that can be sustainable? We've seen it done in the past before. Smaller and medium-sized companies were finding alternate channels, whether developing their own pharmacy hub through the manufacturer themselves, leaning into telemedicine. But I don't think any organization as big as Lilly has really jumped deep into it. And then for Hims and Hers, you're talking about a telehealth, a tech company who has built out a platform focused on customer experience and then now is leaning into the quagmire that is healthcare. So an organization that focused on customer service, like the customer experience, and is now delivering on that is really cool to see.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. We touched on this a little bit, but thinking about the sort of expected outcomes that both patients and brands might see out of this DTC or digital care model. Of course, from the patient standpoint, they're looking for convenience. They're looking for the choice. They're looking for the ability for them to be in charge. Affordability still matters. Their time matters a lot, and their affordability still matters too. Comfort, privacy, being able to do these things in your own home, on your own schedule, and then of course the speed, right? You don't want to trade off on that side, and you want things to show up on your front porch just like everything else in your life. On the brand side, of course, big outcomes there too, and thankfully these can tie together very closely too. Stronger access outcomes, higher engagement from those patients, better adherence, can impact sort of metrics across the stack from the brand side as well. So Mitten, I'm curious from your perspective, what kind of patient trends, what behavioral shifts have you seen that's, kind of helping to drive this DTC rise?
Yeah. And I touched on that in my previous answer a little bit, but I think it's all in one, right? It's everything that's on this slide, and this expectation that if I'm going to do something, if I'm going to buy something, a service or a product, it needs to be perfect, right? And that integration needs to be really seamless. So I think from a patient perspective, really kind of focusing there. From reimbursement's perspective, HCPs are now getting reimbursed for doing these telehealth visits. It's a really good opportunity for them themselves because, quite frankly, there is a shortage of specific physicians in this country, whether they're PCPs, they could be specialists. So not every physician can get to all the patients that are out there. And especially as demographics are changing over the next few years, we're going to see that shortage really kind of start rise to the top for us.
Yes, absolutely. Totally agree. The way I think about it from the patient standpoint is, I have to think about it from the perspective of my own life, right? I think I have little kids. So what do I do? What's the first thing I do when, my kid shows up with a rash or a cough or something like that? First thing I do is I Google it, just like we all do. Anything that happens that you're sick with, right? First thing you do is try and diagnose yourself online. And that's the consumer behavior that we see. The next step from there, of course, is super disjointed, right? You kind of get an idea online, but then what do? Then you're in old school, you're dialing a doctor, you're listening to the hold music, you're waiting for, an appointment to get scheduled, if you're lucky, within the next month, to go have an actual visit. So that, it's just extremely disjointed. Patients are starting their journey online, but then, it's really cutting off, and the, experience really changes after that. So there's an opportunity to bridge that gap for a lot of patients.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
So then maybe let's think a little bit about, different patient populations and efficacy of DTC within that. And just kind of different things to consider. It seems like many folks are in that sort of early information gathering stage. Different things to think about, if DTC could be right for your patient population. And this is a good one too, where I'd encourage, research within that patient population. Try to understand, what are their needs, what are their preferences, what kind of, channels do they want to access their healthcare through? What do they sort of see as, ideal touch points for engagement? And, what kind of strategies could you have to educate those to line up with that patient population? So the way I think about it, and we always recommend, is, think about it from the patient standpoint, and think, is this the right program for my set of patients? And so, Mitten, I know you have some experience here. What kind of populations have you seen this work well for, versus maybe not be the right fit for?
Yeah, and it's so when you say patient population, even the first time that we were kind of running through this, um, my mind immediately went to kind of demographics when you say patient population. So I would encourage the audience to think of this more of, instead of patient population, think of it as disease state, right? Because I think when you start thinking of demographics, you start asking those questions of, are my patients ready for something like this? And it always, somebody had at a different webinar had given the quote of when the laptop was first introduced to businesses. That was in 1994. So you have individuals who have been, let's say, working for the past 30 some odd years, who are digitally savvy enough to take on the kind of evolution of digital for the past 30 years, right? The iPhone came out in 2007. So we've been integrating digital into our entire lives. There's been innovation. Things have changed. Things that were done in the past has changed, and it's really time now for pharma and the healthcare system to really change with it. I think when you think about the disease states, I think it goes back to the science of medicine and really what can be diagnosed and what can be treated without seeing a patient face to face. I think there's a lot of acute diseases that would be a really good fit: men's health, women's health, mental illnesses. Low-hanging fruit, we see that happening today, but starting to see the rise of dermatology products that fit the need for this. Acute respiratory diseases, diabetes, high blood pressure medications, high cholesterol, right? So chronic diseases that require a constant touch point is going to be really interesting to think about. The other part of it that I wouldn't discount is any type of patient monitoring as a path for different companies, especially in the telemedicine part of the. There's a lot of companies that are doing a lot of research within digital therapeutics, or they're looking to develop a digital companion monitoring system. Telehealth is a really great way to to get to those patients and to get those touch points on a more frequent basis. So, and I think you said something early on, right? Jonas, when you were talking about the research, at the end of the day, you as an individual, as a marketing lead, or as a marketer in general, really need to understand your patient's journey, and you'll most likely be able to find a path forward, whether it's for the entire patient population or a smaller subset of it. But I think we can get there.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And to underscore your one on demographics, I'm always impressed and I'd say almost surprised at how little divergence there is that we've seen in sort of familiarity and comfort with technology, even in older populations. In the 85 plus group, we do start to see pretty significant divergence, but below that, there's really really very high familiarity. I mean, ultimately, this is the generation that sort of invented a lot of the technology or the precursors to the technology that we're using today.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think my grandmother would be a good fit for this, right? But there's definitely that generation that's there now, and again, demographics are shifting, and this is going to be the next 5, 10, 15 years of exponential growth in this space.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So, some other factors to think about here too, your program strategy, program design, what's your coverage strategy? How are you planning to price it? Where are you in the sort of cycle of that brand, or, near towards launch and later on, and how do these different elements fit into it? So those are good kind of, questions to ask yourself as you're sort of deciding whether it's, appropriate for you. What's your kind of pricing and sort of coupon strategy as part of that? What are your regulatory requirements too? Depending on the type of therapy that you have, you could be higher, more stringent ones that are not particularly scheduled substances, et cetera. So there's a few things to consider there too. And then on the as Minton mentioned, sort of what's the complexity of the condition? What's the ability to diagnose via telehealth appointment, for example. That's changing a lot as well, as there's a lot more at-home test kits and that kind of thing that people can do. And particularly if you have like a very strong population that lives in remote areas, for example, it could be a great alternative for those folks. The way I would think about it in general is sort of as like a oftentimes can be a strong supplement to brick and mortar strategy, but can be a really big component of that. Cool. Anything else you wanted to add here, Minton?
I would just say really that last point, right? The compliance and regulations. I think that's where a lot of folks get a little hesitant on it. But with the ways that things have changed over the past 4 years, 5 years, compliance and regulations are, I wouldn't say friendlier, but they are they are evolving, right? They're catching up to where the population needs to be today. So I think that's definitely a point not to discount there.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. So think about some strategies for having a strong direct consumer model. And we'll kind of tick through these a little bit one by one and spend some time here. You want to think about multiple access channels. So as I mentioned, telehealth and a GTC model as sort of one element to your strategy, complementing that, brick and mortar, more traditional retail strategy potentially. One of the things that the telehealth channel and sort of this integration can provide is, really granular insights to how the whole funnel is working across your whole patient experience. And so on the kind of telehealth piece, on the access channel side, Minton, I'm curious from your perspective, when you're thinking about a telehealth partner, how would you go about selecting the right partner? How do you evaluate them?
Yeah, I think the first thing is they have to align with your organization's goals, right? I think that's the first thing that you need to focus on. The data is probably the second thing that would make sure that you have built out. Because at the end of the day, that's what, as a marketer, I'm trying to get my hands on. I'm trying to understand where their pitfalls, where their challenges, where there are opportunities for me to really focus on. So having somebody that has a very strong data background, and being able to really consolidate that is huge. And then finally, somebody who understands, and I touched on it on the previous slide, but who understands the compliance and regulatory environment that we're in is huge. I live in a world of medical, legal, regulatory reviews. My compliance team is joined to me at the hip if I'm doing projects like this. So, a vendor that understands that it's not a direct yes, there is a whole host of work that needs to be a part of it is kind of how we would get there. I think that's how if we're identifying a vendor, and then also the manufacturers themselves. I think you need to look within, make sure that the organization's right for it. I think that is a question that a lot of folks tend to not ask themselves. Make sure from a digital marketing perspective that you're doing the foundational elements correctly. Make sure your media strategy is set right, your SEO strategy, your website strategy, because all of this is going to be fully integrated with what we're trying to do.
Great points. Great points. Another element too, another piece of the strategy that's really important is to have that digital prescription sort of fulfillment piece of it. So having that model built out. As I mentioned earlier, consumers start their healthcare journey online pretty much all the time. If you go through to the sort of have the telehealth Lego block built in, but then you're sending those prescriptions from there straight out to retail, then it's, a lot of those patients are going to have a pretty bad outcome and likely not get on therapy, or ultimately they're going to, have much lower coverage outcomes. And so the brand is going to be footing the bill for those patients getting on therapy. So, having a digital prescription fulfillment, both from a consumer experience standpoint, but then also that, as I mentioned earlier, that back office workflow coordination between the telehealth provider and the pharmacy to make sure that you have great coverage outcomes for those patients. Great coverage outcomes, more patients on therapy, stronger financial outcomes for the brand. So thinking about, that combination of both the digital prescription model as well as, a simplified PA process and, other coverage attempts that you may be making as well. So that I think is a really important piece, those kind of two bubbles in the chart here. When you think about Mitten, this sort of the digital patient, the provider experience, simplifying PAs, et cetera, what did you, when you were considering a digital hub, what kind of factors were you evaluating at that point? I'm curious now because we were on the other end of that at the time.
Yeah, no, I'm smiling and I'm laughing because I think back to that time, and we've gone so far since then. I think it's an issue that a lot of organizations are dealing with, whether they want to admit it or not, or it's the elephant in the room. I mean, how often have we seen marketing does their job of setting the strategy, finding the right messages, and using the data to tell a story? We'll then train our sales reps correctly and compliantly with that information. They'll go out and they'll go visit a doctor or an office 3, 4, 5, 6 times over the course of their call cycle. They'll talk to not only the physician themselves, but then also any support staff that may be in the office. And then finally, maybe the doctor says, "Yep, I'll try your product out. Give me a sample." They get that clinical experience, and now they've bought into not only the science but also the clinical experience. So now you've gone through all of these gates, all of these barriers, and you get that golden ticket. Doctor's going to write the script, and the script goes in, and poof, right? It kind of disappears, and about 30 days, 45 days later, you'll get a report that says, "Yeah, 5% of your scripts went through." The question is, what happened there? So I think the biggest need for us as an organization was really understanding where the issues were happening, and partnering with Phil was huge for us because it helped open that up, and really seeing that data and being able to track the PAs that are going through and the process within that. I think more so from a home office perspective, I can see it at a national level. From a rep perspective, it was even better because now I'm giving my internal stakeholders a little bit more faith in the system that we're trying to arm you with the best tools possible to get the job done. So they know if a script has gone in, that it requires another follow-up with that doctor to coach up that patient, they'll add that into their routing. So It's been just simply that data portion of it has been fantastic for us, Jonas.
Glad to hear it. Happy we've been able to help there. You touched a little bit there on sort of field education, provider education, patient education. I guess I'm curious to hear, what kind of strategies you've seen most successful on that kind of like education of these various different parties in the ecosystem.
Yeah, no. So the first thing is repetition, right? It's for every single audience, it's repetition, it's repetition, it's repetition. For our field, making sure that they're comfortable with the entire program and portal from start to finish. That was huge for us. Being able to train them up on that, being able to triage any questions that come through was great. Because if they don't believe in that system themselves and they don't understand it, they can't take it to the next level, which is our customers, so our prescribers. Being able to simply say, hey, we have a solution for you. You can send it to Phil and it will be taken care of. It's not only the physician, right? A lot of times they're so busy thinking about so many other options. A lot of times it's their support staff who might be doing the prior authorizations in the office and getting to them, sitting down with them, talking to them, being able to go through the portal, being able to help them understand, hey, this is what you need to tell your patients, utilizing, even though we're talking about digital uh, ideas right now, utilizing good old paper, right? Handouts for your patients just to educate them on what that process looks like. And then the follow up, right? And I think this is where an organization like Phil really shined is that constant touch point with the patient throughout the process has been great. So we know if a patient has signed up initially or if we're waiting for them to put in their payment information. We know where they are through that entire process. So that's been great for us. On a marketing side of things, it's your, again, bread and butter foundational tactics. Make sure your CRM programs are up to scratch. Make sure you're finding the right patients that are going to be a part of this, and you're really, really understanding what their issues are at the end of the day. I think is still key for us.
Makes sense. The last thing here that I want to touch on this slide is sort of real-time data, real-time insights. So you mentioned a few things there. I know this is your daily bread and butter, Mitten. So I'm curious to hear from you, when you think about it, evaluating a DTC program, like what metrics are would you be watching most closely? Are you thinking about as like key success criteria?
Yeah, I mean, let's take those Lego building blocks, right? And start from there. So I think really when I think about my DTC marketing, from a DTC perspective, you have your soft marketing KPIs, right? That are always trying to deliver an experience. And it could be conversion on site. You can try and figure out how many visits you got onto your website or click-through rates through your banner ads. A lot of stuff that every organization does. I think when adding in the element of telemedicine into it, it changes the dynamic quite a bit because now from a DTC marketing perspective, it's much easier to draw the line from to understand what an ROI on a campaign would be. Dollar in, dollar out, because you can track that script from start to finish. Of course, everything's anonymized, no PHI there, but you can see if your campaigns are doing better. And it's the first time that pharma's had that. I'm jealous at times of my friends and colleagues that are in CPG or in e-commerce because you ask them of saying, "Hey, is Instagram working for you?" Yeah, I mean, we just drove $60,000 in revenue just off of that. What about you? You just did these broadcast television commercials. How was that? Well, I think it was good. We had eyeballs on it, but I did they convert into scripts? You don't know. There are ways to measure it today, but I don't think there's anything that tells you as clearly as something like a telehealth integration like that. So yeah, so I think from digital marketing perspective, from those blocks, those are the metrics that I'm absolutely looking at. I'm absolutely tracking. On a digital hub, there's a ton of metrics there, right? Again, I think Phil, because they are our partner, have shown what their data can do. I think You start as simple as enrollment rates. How many patients are coming into the funnel, to conversion rates? How many of them are actually getting out at the end of it, actually getting the script shipped to them? It then leads into refill information. How often are refills getting out there? So we'll look at that. How often are your access plans approving or denying a prior authorization? What are the issues there? And the beauty of all of this, and I keep going back to this data, is that this is as close to real time as I can get. So I can be, instead of reactive in a lot of situations, I can start being proactive the more I collect data. So now we've gotten to the point where it's more of a longitudinal look at this data for our products themselves. So it's really cool.
Yes, very cool, very cool. A lot of power when you can see the intent.
Power.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. So we've talked about a lot of the benefits. Let's talk about some of the challenges. So I want to do a poll here. Thanks, Mira. Hear from you all, biggest challenges that you either are currently facing or you expect that you would face with standing up a DTC program. Is it that, internal buy-in, securing the investment? Is it the legal compliance side? Is it you're driving education and awareness? Or is it sort of the snapping together, the finding and the snapping together of these different building blocks? It's still, nascent approach, and there aren't a lot of people doing it yet. So it's not maybe as easy as some more traditional models. So curious to hear from you all what your biggest challenges are. Let's see here. Across the board. Let's see. Buy-in, not the biggest challenge. So that's great to see. Compliance definitely makes sense. Integrating the various different building blocks, finding these Lego pieces and making them snap. That absolutely makes sense too. Great. Well, thanks for the insights there. Why don't we shift ahead then and talk a little bit about those challenges? Maybe we'll start on the regulatory compliance side. Of course, that lines throughout the whole process and anything that you need to stand up, and all the programs that we've stood up as well. So that's a big factor. As mentioned earlier, there's a bit more, a bit of a softening of an approach there from a regulatory standpoint. With the pandemic, of course, telehealth became a much more commonly accepted model than before. Some of those restrictions were relaxed. But Mitten, you have dealt with this quite a lot. From your perspective, how have you navigated that regulatory, compliance landscape before?
Yeah, so I think it goes back to, if you're introducing something new, it's going to be a big deal. Look, telemedicine and really kind of circling DTC it's the definition of change management, right? So finding the right partners and getting to them early was huge. Finding the sponsors within the organization, leadership that can help pull everything together. And then taking it a step lower, right? So leadership is great, right? Everything sounds great as a bullet point on a slide in your quarterly update. But really, that next level of the doers, making sure that they're on board, finding the organizations, and also looking for inspiration externally. Look at your partners, look at other products that are in the area that have shown it, and really challenge your legal and compliance partners to say, if this organization did it, why can't we? And I think that is a miss at times, right? Of our compliance and legal teams are so reactive to things that they don't get the opportunity to go and hunt and figure out ways to make something happen. It's usually a, can I do this? No, you can't. But turn it on their head, give them a challenge, give them something to do. I think you'll find it working out fairly well for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always easy, particularly on these topics. It's easy to say no, but I think it becomes a little bit smoother now once you start seeing some prominent comps out there of brands that are doing it. And that's one of the things that I really hope, as we've seen Lilly Direct, is that a big established brand, you can really look at that and say, they figured it out, we can figure it out too.
Doing it compliantly, right? I think that is the hottest therapeutic area right now, and being able to set up not only just the telemedicine side of things, but also the pharmacy services side of things, right? There's so many rules and regulations that you have to be cognizant of. So, look, if an organization can move towards that and move towards that fairly quickly, I think anyone could do it.
Yeah, absolutely. How about on market education, driving awareness, sort of advertising side, standing up those campaigns, et cetera? Any particular tactics you want to share there?
I think I'm a do it simple and do it well type of individual. Um, I touched on this earlier, right? Making sure that your organization's ready for it, making sure your marketing strategy is ready for it. Um, it's going to be digital first. And if you're not already thinking like that, make sure you are. So make sure your website strategy is up to scratch, right? You haven't focused on other high value targets or conversion rates on your site. You're going to need to change them to move them this way. Make sure your media strategy is digitally integrated, especially when you're looking at patients themselves. Push your agency partners, your vendors that you're working with, a little bit harder on what are they actually delivering. And I think that's where the the meat of this will come out over the next 5 years is, okay, do I really need to be doing XYZ tactic? Is it driving the value for me at the end of the day? So I think that that's a huge part of it. I know, Jonas, you touched on the research part of it earlier. I think that's a really great place to start, right? Because that'll help you understand in your therapeutic area for your product which patients are really going to be responsive for this. And I think that will help give you a sense of, okay, these are the patients that I want to capture. Um, and then finally, really, uh, I think we all need in this industry need to take a little bit from our colleagues in the tech industry, individuals like Jonas, who develop fast, fail fast, but fix just as fast. So I think that try it out, see if it works. If it doesn't work, pivot, find a way to make it work. I think we need to change our mindset overall.
Yeah, that's certainly one of the things from my background that I really tried to bring here and bring to healthcare. Tech is very much that kind of that fail fast mentality. Of course, fail fast is the way that you iterate, is the way that you learn. While you're doing that, of course, you can't take any shortcuts on the regulatory compliance side, and then also on the data privacy, data security. That's something that's also very close to my heart, thinking, way back to, cryptography class of, computer science undergrad, all that. So that's something that you, of course, have to be very careful about throughout. And as you mentioned, sort of this full funnel data attribution as well, you have to make sure that that's all, fully anonymized, nothing's getting shared where it shouldn't without consent, et cetera. Anything particular on that point, the data privacy security sort of safeguards that you've dealt with?
Stay up to date. It's an ever-changing landscape. Every organization, every product's going to have their own rules depending on where they're set up. Rule of thumb in the US, California, follow what they're doing. They usually tend to be on the cutting edge there. But I think that goes back to the regulatory compliance, legal side of things. Those partners are your best friends when you're setting something like this up. Make sure that you're up to there. I think again, I would hazard a guess over the next 5 to 10 years, data privacy and security, your common individual who may not be tech savvy, quote unquote, is going to be focused a lot more on this, uh, especially as other organizations are really focusing on this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The data security privacy is something that you're never done with. You never can have done enough, and so it's something we're constantly fighting as well. Great. So talk a little bit about challenges. Why don't I do the case study and then open Q&A after that. So this is a brand that we worked with here at Phil. So a women's health brand. What they approached us and they had done some research, as we talked about, on their patient population. They have very strong desire for, a digital experience, kind of end to end for them. They're looking for something integrated, all of these different building blocks that we talked about, and then a digital hub that would provide data that they could kind of share and do the analysis that Mitten mentioned earlier. And then, excuse me. And then, of course, something that was going to drive strong coverage outcomes on the back end as well. So they came to us with that sort of as the problem statement. We partnered with them and set up these sort of different elements. So multiple access channels, as we talked about earlier. They have both a brick and mortar access channel with a traditional field sales force, but then also this telehealth, which has become a very very large portion of the volume for that business. So that's kind of one piece. The telehealth platform itself, very deep integration between ourselves, and that platform, and a very streamlined sort of workflow on the back end around it. Of course, a digital prescription management, fulfillment process, and then the data and insights that we talked about. So that's been very successful. You can see some stats here on this program. 91% patient enrollment through the DTC channel. Twice the pull through versus prescriptions that are going through retail. 90 plus, I think this number might be even a little low, percent submissions getting sent to the plan. And of course, strong coverage outcomes resulting from that. 5 times the refill adherence, partially due to these, patient experience pieces and partially due to the coverage outcomes. So, just really, really outsize, metrics that we've, been able to deliver, and, with our partner here. So that's just one case study, but if you weren't interested before, certainly a lot that you can get from establishing a DTC program. Great. So with that, I think maybe flip to Q&A.
Yeah, that would be great. So before we dive into Q&A, which it's always great to get questions from the audience, I'm just going to launch a really quick poll here to ask if anyone would like to have a follow-up conversation from the Phil team. Just let us know. We'll hold this open for a few moments. And while we do, just wanted to share the playbook on the right. If you're interested in diving specifically into the piece around HCP engagement and education, this is a really great resource that kind of dives more specifically and tactically into those strategies to kind of help support this direct-to-consumer model. So highly recommend scanning the QR code and checking that out if that is of interest to you. I'm going to close this poll now, and we will move on to questions. So one question we have here is, could you do a pilot program for a direct-to-consumer program, and what would that look like?
Yeah, I can jump in, and then if you want to follow up too. Yes, absolutely. So I think pilot programs are a great way to get started on sort of dipping your toe into something. When you're thinking about that, sort of developing the organizational buy-in, you of course want to test your way into it a little bit. You want to sort of fail quickly, as Mitten said, or succeed quickly, and then be able to expand. And so doing a pilot program, a certain amount of marketing budget, et cetera, could make a lot of sense to get into it. And then you can figure out how big a piece of your total access strategy that's going to end up being. Mitten, anything you would add on
that? You're perfect. Are you sure you're not in marketing? Because that's exactly the way I would handle it. Yeah, no, look, pilot programs, especially for something that is as cutting edge as this, it's definitely going to be needed. You don't want to go full bore without testing it out, making sure you get all the kinks out first.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Another question here is, how would HCP professional engagement and patient community engagement align with the engagement model you've seen as being successful?
Mitten, anything that you would add on this one?
So I think with this, there's two parts of it. One, there's always a concern for HCP professional engagements that you might be stealing some of their patients that they would see from this. I think one, you have to find that balance of, yeah, this isn't a patient that's most likely going to come and see you anyway. And then two, really helping reiterate the fact that in this disease state, there probably isn't enough doctors that are out there. This is a first step in that patient's journey for this disease, right? Whether it's chronic or it's an acute disease, whatever it may be, but really kind of helping pull that together. I think that's probably the challenge that I think some folks have. The organizations that I've seen do that really well, well, one, Lilly is doing that well, but I think they have a very, very broad reach. There was a small ophthalmology company called RVL that did this really well. And what they did is they actually went out first to their reps, first to their professionals, and let them know that this was coming down the pike, that the organization was going to do it. Then they had patients themselves sign up for this, and they started bringing feedback from the patients and sharing that back to their professionals. So patient testimonials started playing a role in this. And I think overall the brand saw quite a bit of engagement throughout it.
That's great.
Jonas, anything might have missed something there?
No, totally agree. Totally agree.
Amazing. Another question we have here is, I would love to hear your thoughts on how to bridge the gap between digital natives and digital immigrants. So I'm assuming what this person is asking is around, when you have a direct to consumer model and you are dealing with maybe a broader population, some are more comfortable and familiar with technology and some are less so. How do you navigate that?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. So think about it in sort of different parts of the patient experience journey as well. So as you mentioned, you think about DTC as one element of the overall access strategy. And in different touch points within that journey, you want to have the option for the patient to be able to talk to a person, for them to be able to go in person to a provider as well. So you can think about having that ad campaign at the very top of the funnel, drive them through with telehealth as an option, and maybe you lead with that, but also the ability to find a provider to be able to go visit them in person and do the more traditional model if they're not comfortable. Similarly, we think about this in the digital hub model. We lead with the technology side of it, lead with the digital experience, but at any point there's always a person there, a person behind the scenes that you can reach out to, that you can talk to. And so that way we kind of bridge where the majority of people who are comfortable with technology are then getting their experience, but then the people who maybe want something different can self-identify that and have a great experience that meets them where they are. So that's how I kind of think about it, is providing those sort of branching points in the experience so that people can choose their route.
Yeah, many paths to a single destination, right? So just making sure that you can pull it all together is probably the main focus.
Great. Another question we have here is, based on your experience, which model is more successful, asynchronous telehealth versus synchronous telehealth?
I can start here, and maybe you want to jump in after. I think on that, it's going to be pretty dependent on the therapeutic area. So different kinds of treatments might need an in-person or a live synchronous appointment, and other ones might work well asynchronous. I know HIMSS, for example, they do quite a lot of asynchronous telehealth. Other ones might need a more synchronous one. So I think it varies a little bit. I don't know if I have like a single stock answer for that. Mitten, you want to add?
No, I would wholeheartedly agree with that. It is going to be dependent on the disease state. It's going to be dependent on the patient. I think for some disease states, you may want a more synchronous route, and it could be, I can see it in the cosmetology space or more kind of aesthetic space of getting that immediate reply. Certain patients in certain areas expect a certain level of customer service or responsiveness from their physicians. So it's just finding the right balance.
Yeah, that makes sense. Another question here is, what's the general timeline for implementing a program like this?
On that front, I think it can vary a lot based on the organization. Maybe change it a little bit. It's less, at least from our perspective, it's going to be more about how do you kind of get everybody on board internally? How do you align your strategy? If that can happen and you have great buy-in, you have a compliance team that's going to sort of be able to work around the things that you need to work around, then it could be very quick. And certainly ourselves, like as a vendor, we could stand this kind of thing up very, very quickly. But depending on what roadblocks you hit internally, that timeline obviously could stretch out. Mitten, anything here that you would think about?
Yeah, I think it matters on the organization, right? So if you have a digital hub already set up, I think you have a pretty big part of the equation developed. It could be, I've seen it done as quickly as less than a quarter. And there's some people that I know that have been working on this for 6 quarters. So I think it's a fairly wide range. And I think that's where you honestly have to ask the question to the organization, are we ready for this? And really, if the answer is no, not yet, build the parts that take the most time first, make sure they're up and running, make sure that you found that right partner, and then start layering in all of the enhancements or all of the other opportunities and strategies that you have.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, we're nearly at time here, so we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Mitten, Jonas, thank you so much for being here today and sharing your great insights on the webinar.